Hello. I am. I gotta have some tea. You'll see that this is the fairest of them all. It's really this side that's the winner. Oh, it's Snow White, of course. Snow White. Um, I remember reading a long time ago. This is when I was just getting interested in. Well, I always loved animation, but I was interested in animation as a. I started getting interested in animation as a cultural, as something that people produced, and that I was interested in how complex it was, and it was magic. And this is very common. The origin of animation was that people didn't understand when they saw the first animated films. They were like, how is that possible? These drawings are just moving on their own. And this is the issue that people who love film, or don't, I guess, have to come to grips with, is this idea that we used to talk about moving pictures. Okay, we don't talk about that anymore, but there is no motion in the motion picture. You're running a piece of film, which is effectively a series of stills, and this is the same thing. It doesn't matter whether it's digital or a strip of celluloid. Doesn't matter. But it's a series of still frames, and there's no actual motion there. It's just a series of still frames which happen to be in the right order, and they happen to be close enough to each other that when you put them in the brain in enough with enough consistency and with the right timing, which is at least 24 frames a second, or 24. You can think of it 24 images, going to the brain in a second, and the brain takes one image and it lays the next one over it, the next one over it, the next one over it, and so there's this what we call persistence of vision. And it's the persistence of vision which is really the sort of biological trick that makes animation, or really any film, possible, because we wouldn't otherwise see motion. So you can sort of imagine, if we didn't have this persistence of vision, we would look at a film and you'd say, oh, that's an interesting still, and there's another interesting still, and I watched 2 hours of stills because there wouldn't be any motion in them. And that's what Magic Lanterns used to be. That was a series of slides that were painted on glass. Anyway, the fairest of them all. So Snow White, it never really hit me how much these things meant culturally until I was reading somebody saying about Snow White that when she has that, she runs into the woods, and because they're after her heart, and the guy with the box and the huntsman, and she runs through and nature becomes terrifying to her, and so on. And then she lands in the clearing, and of course she sees all the wonderful birds and animals of nature and how they've come to help her. It'd be great if they all ate her alive, but oh well, that wasn't the Disney we come to know and struggle with. And she says, what do you do when you're... She says, I'm so afraid of the fuss I made. I'm so sorry for the fuss I made, and all because I was afraid. And the person I was reading at the time, this is at least 30, 40 years ago, said, everybody understood that this was a message, basically, from essentially the powers that be. Disney, Roosevelt was saying the same thing, because it's 36, remember, so smack in the middle of the Depression, which was actually going to get worse. Between 36 and 38, the Depression actually got worse worldwide. There were depressions inside the Depression. It was just god-awful. And nobody was saying, there's enough food in the country. It's like, no, there wasn't. People were starving, or they just weren't going to get it. So we just didn't have anything of the kind of security that we have looked for and wanted by today. And so Anyway, so Snow White says, I'm so ashamed of the fuss. That's it. I'm so ashamed of the fuss I made, and all because I was afraid. And so this commentator was saying basically, this is because everybody understood that Snow White was talking about the Depression, and I was like, right. It's one of those. The light went on, and I was like, yes, of course. These texts are about what people were going through, and all art and all human expression, it's about what we're going through at the moment. So today I was looking at this mug, and I thought I just want to have my Snow White mug, and I did have another Snow White mug, and you've seen me use this in the office, and it's got this big chip out of it, and people say, how come you still use that? I'm like, because I love this mug, and I can't get rid of it. I won't. No, you can't make me. I promised I would show you my sister's tatting. I was going to talk about this. So tatting looks like this. As you can see, it's sort of kind of hard to see. I have to do the Vanna White. Does anybody remember who Vanna White was? This is sort of what it looks like. You can see how colorful and amazing this is. My sister pretty much taught herself to do this. She kind of teaches herself to do everything. It's amazing. She's just an amazing person. So there's a name for all these little. I think these are called picots. She'll tell me. I'm forgetting. I think that's what these little. So there's a name for all of these parts, but basically, as you can see, it's a repeating pattern, and you can see how much it's geometric, and it has to be done in one piece. That is, I think you start to go around basically, and you go around and around, and you make the pieces, and you keep on going. So you mustn't screw up, basically. And to give you an idea of the patience, I sometimes when she's working in her room, when she's visiting, and I'll go in and I'll say, and I'll hear her saying, so this has to go like this, and then this, oh yeah, okay. And so then a couple of hours later I say, so how's it going? She's like, well, I figured out, I think, how to do this part of it. Amazing. What did I want to tell you about that? I mean, apart from the fact that this is related in some ways to lace making, because as you know, lace making, they sort of use a bunch of pins, and not just a bunch of pins. It's a very, very complex, and they're using very fine thread, and that's how they produce that really superior lace. And then they all went blind when they were 30. God. But what's amazing about this is that it's knotting. Really, so it's a series of knots, and the knots make up the thing. So there isn't anything inside this. It's just knots. Amazing. So it's kind of like making a net, I guess. If you think about that, that a net, like a fish net, is also basically it's thread and knots, and that's kind of it. Which is seriously beyond me. I was thinking about a lot of you are working on, or you're coming to a point where I see it in your work, where you have found. You've got a hold of your voice, and you're developing it. You're pushing it, and you're beginning to realize and remember. I think really remember. I think what happens with school is that fundamentally school replaces who we are with somebody who is more quote unquote functional, and can be placed, can be clicked into the overall system. That's basically your job. And I get that that's a sort of it's quite a geometric metaphor, I suppose. It's kind of like a puzzle, that you're supposed to fit in. And that belies, I think, on the fact that there's space, actually, for surprises and accidents and things like that. But most people sort of, come along and click. It's like a magnet, sort of finding its home. Click, whoops, and so a lot of you. So you're finding your voices again, or you're refining your voices, and this is true for art. It's true for, it doesn't matter, music, art, dance, cooking, sewing. It doesn't matter what the art form is. Making film, shooting photographs, drawing pictures. It doesn't matter. But the thing that is, I think that certainly initially people feel they don't have a voice. It's like, no, oh no, you've got one. It's in there just because you're there. I mean, you wouldn't be walking around. You're not some, you know. You're not some one of those Funko Pop toys that they turn out of a in a blind box. Blind box toys. You buy the box and you don't know what's inside. You don't know what the toy is inside it. Oh, many a many a difficult time was had. I was with a friend of mine and she wanted a particular toy, and these were beautiful Japanese toys, and they were in blind boxes, so the box is just marked. All the boxes are marked the same way, but you're after a specific toy, and every time you open a box, it's like whatever it is, $15, $20, and then you bought that toy, and if you didn't want that one, well, too bad, and they don't want to buy it back from you, so you gotta. So you pick up the box and you're like, is this heavy enough for you? You're hoping to get the right toy. That's part of the joy. For me, I'm just like, could I have that? I really like this toy. Thank you. Blind boxes. I'm like, oh, okay, this is another whole level of Toy-mageddon that I can't can't conceive of it. As Huck Finn would say, it's too many for me. And this always reminds me of one of those diners where they're like, warm you up, hun? It's like, how come they never do that for tea? They're always coming by with their crappy coffee. Warm you up, hun? Especially in the South. Oh, honey, do you want to warm that coffee up? I mean, how about the tea? Could you warm up my tea and don't put any coffee in it? Which just happened to me one day. I was in the South at I'd made a cup of tea, and at the in some restaurant we were going through. And this woman very hospitably came along and filled my teacup with coffee. I was like, oh, wow. Oh, my God. Oh, it was like an atrocity. Anyway, so your voice. And the thing about what's interesting about, I think this is very reassuring. And so actually, this is what I was thinking about today, is that people are frightened because they think, well, what's going to happen? And, well, we don't know what's going to happen, right? We've got to go with it and, breathe and do our thing and do what we can do right now. And, okay. And, but part of this reassurance has to do with the fact that people are afraid they're somehow going to lose themselves, or it's something like that we're afraid that some disaster will happen and come and take us away, or make us disappear, or make us vanish, or we'll lose the sort of core sense of who we are. But really, that would have to be some disaster indeed. I mean, that would have to be so much worse than... It would have to be a catastrophe. I mean, I don't even mean a Katrina-sized catastrophe, and I don't mean this kind of sort of worldwide. No. This is not the thing we have to be afraid of. And what's interesting, and what reminds me, when people say, I found my voice again, basically, but what if I lose it? What if I go out into the world and I become somebody different and I forget who I was, or I forget who I am now, So I'm 22 or 21 and I'm going to graduate, and or I've graduated and I have to I've got to do further schooling, and it's more disciplined. An MA or some kind of graduate school is going to be they're going to force some discipline on you, and that's how you're going to get a job. So you're going to get a master's of social work, or I don't know, get a law degree or something, and it's going to change the way you think. It's like, sure, it's going to have an effect on the way you think, yes, but it doesn't have to change who you are. It's going to temper your public self, for sure. Yeah, I mean, you're going to see things differently. But then that's what we do. We just go on seeing things differently, and that's what life is about. I mean, we are always seeing things differently. But there is the same. Here's the sort of, for me, the key, like the thing that reminds me. It's like, well, actually, you don't forget. Your system doesn't forget who you are. And I keep various different kinds of notebooks and I don't know, different kinds of notebooks is probably the easy way to put it. Some things I keep notes for lectures in, and some things I write ideas for books I'm working on, and I don't know, projects that might come up or might not, and or there's a little bit of poetry that comes to mind, or I have an image or idea, something, and over the course of decades now, I've been keeping these kinds of things, and it's quite. I don't have like a line of them on a shelf or something like that. I just sort of keep them, and they tend to last a long time because I'm thinking, and so there may be a lot of thinking on one page, and then I go on to the next page. And I go back to that page if I'm like, oh, I'm still on subject X. I go back to that page, and in this thinking process, I will sometimes go back, or I'll come across a file, and I think, oh, an actual physical file, and I think, oh, I forgot about this. What's in here? So I started looking, and I'm like, look at this idea. I must have been keeping this file. When was I keeping this file? And I was like, well, let's see. It's got this stuff in it. This is probably 10 years old or 15 years old. And there I see the kernel of an idea that I had 15 years ago, which I have had again and written into my new commonplace book, which is what they're often called. And there it is, again, the same bloody idea. And I think, wow, for me, it's like, well, apparently I'm not having any new thoughts at all. I'm just duplicating this same old, garbage in, garbage out, blah. But what's reassuring about this, and this is really what I wanted to say, is that there's a continuity there where we are who we are, and that we include things that become more and more us, and we exclude things that we are like, no, I recognize that this is not who I am, or no, that's not good for me, or I don't like it, or just for whatever reason, it's like, you're not doing that anymore, but you are doing this thing. And this, for me, is the sort of this notion of continuity, where your ideas and your core self, even if you have significant changes in who you are, even if you have epiphanies and you go through, in fact, for me, I think that those epiphanies actually strengthen and clarify who you were when you were 20. I didn't necessarily know the answers to sort of complex questions or any questions. You're like, okay, you produced an answer, because people would say, what do you think of this? You're like, I don't know. Here, I'll answer you. But then, when you're 30, you begin to form answers, and by the time you're 40, you're like, okay, this is what I think of that, and so this continuity is a very interesting process, because it is reassuring that this is going to sound really, really very basic, and it is in many ways, that we are who we are, and that the you who I had a friend at UBC who was this great prof, and he helped me a great deal, and he would be talking about, I'd say, how's teaching today, Tom? And he would say, Well, things were going fine, and I was asking, the class was discussing, it'd be some piece of literature. We were discussing Adrian Rich's Diving into the Wreck. And then Cindy Lou Who at the back of the classroom pipes up and says, "Is this about swimming?" That kind of thing. So he used to talk about Cindy Lou Who. And I always would have that image, of Cindy Lou Who with her little curl and, please, Santa Claus, why? Yeah, Cindy Lou Who. Oh my goodness. Anyway, so Yoo-Hoo. So Yoo-Hoo were this person at age 5 who colored and liked to draw pictures of houses and make sure that the chimneys were crooked. This is another friend of mine who always made sure chimneys were crooked. You see, couldn't draw a straight chimney, and after a while, it became his signature. It was at age 6, he would like, please, Derek, show us a crooked chimney. He's like, I'll put one in for you. He was the chimney expert. Oh man. So that person at age 5 is still you at age 15, at age 20, and it gets easier and clearer to see who that person is, because I think of this continuity where we are reminded and we come back to it and we see, oh, I'm having this idea again. Once more, my mind is producing this idea, and I didn't have anything to do with it. I thought about this, and then I thought about that, and this is actually this is what I'm thinking about. This is what I'm interested in. This is what I believe in. This is what I'm curious about. This is what I want to do. This is the music I love. These are the ideas that attract me. So all of that is it's all connected and related, and there's a great reassurance in that you and this ironically goes back to the story I was telling about my teacher, the industrial designer, whose whole thing was, you should be drawing in such a relaxed way that if somebody comes and takes away your drawings, you're like, that's okay, I'll make more. Well, the same thing is true with your ideas. You're gonna make more ideas. So if somebody takes an idea of yours and fucks it up, it's like, okay, well, you're gonna make more. There's more where that came from, because there's you. You are your own resource. You who are your own resource. So that's, I think, a very reassuring thing in these, as they say, in these troubled times. May I offer you an egg?